Social Perception by Linda Alves, Liberty University. 2 Corinthians 10:12. For we dare not make ourselves of the number or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. King James Version. Hello and welcome to my presentation on Social Perceptions 2. Here's some of the topics that I will be covering today. Throughout history, laws around racism has changed. These changes have not eliminated racism. Instead, racism has changed the way it looks. Although blatant racism is not seen as frequently as it once was, racism still exists. In today's society, racism is more hidden in undertones and behaviors as people continue to struggle with differences in opinion. Subtle racism can be broken up into three categories: modern, aversive, and implicit. Racism sometimes isn't very easy to identify in the actions or words of others. There are other times, however, that racism is more obvious and more blatant. In modern times, signs are more subtle, hidden in motives and veiled under what appears to be kindness. According to Casson, modern racism is a subtle form of prejudice that tends to surface when it's safe, socially acceptable, or easy to rationalize. Many people want to believe that they don't struggle with racism, and at times may even demonstrate acts of unbiased behavior, such as having a friend of an opposite race. Even though these behaviors may appear otherwise, many feelings about races linger beneath the surface. Another form of racism that is subtle is implicit. According to Casson, implicit racism is racism that operates unconsciously and unintentionally. In social settings, feelings of anxiety around other races may begin to exhibit implicit racism. Some may not even be aware of these feelings. This kind of racism is more prevalent in proximity, moving away from other races, not making eye contact, or maybe not verbally interacting with each other in public settings. Much like racism, sexism has also seen some improvements, but in other areas, it continues to be more subtle and masked under other behaviors. According to Casson, ambivalent sexism consists of two elements: hostile sexism, characterized by negative, resentful feelings about a woman's ability, value, and challenges a man's power, and benevolent sexism, characterized by affectionate, chivalrous feelings founded on the potential patronizing belief that women need and deserve protection. From the moment gender is revealed in an infant, the roles that gender has in society begin to emerge. These roles fit into stereotypes, and these stereotypes can be objectified. Carl's Jr. or Hardee's is well known for their hamburger commercials. Commercials such as these demonstrate an ambivalent attitude towards women. Aside from commercials, other areas in society portray an ambivalent attitude, such as the workforce. Women continue to struggle for equal pay and are frequently stereotyped for specific careers. According to Casson, it's interesting to note that 98% of the dental hygienists in the United States in 2011 were women, but only 22% of the dentists were. Trying to fight for better pay and better positions continues to be a struggle for many women today. In many cases, once they're promoted or given fair pay, how others saw them before changes. According to Casson, they are seen as more competent if they present themselves with stereotypical masculine rather than feminine traits. Yet when they do this, they're also perceived as less socially skilled and attractive, a perception that may ultimately cost them their position or career advancements they were seeking. Stereotypes also have an influence on how we take in new information. The stereotypes sometimes can interfere with making a clear decision about a group of people. In a study done by Bashir at the University of Toronto, social change was evaluated in 5 separate studies about stereotyping and hesitancy towards positive changes. The results were as the researchers expected. Much of the hesitancy to make changes was due to negative stereotypes toward female activists who encouraged change, indicating the stereotypes of the activists influenced their support for social change. In high school, there are jocks, the nerds, the cool kids, the cheerleaders, and the rebels. Because people can be so diverse, an easier way to identify others is to put them into a category. An in-group views themselves in terms of we or us and views the out-group as them. The in-group may view their distinctions between members, but view the opposing group in similarities such as they're nerds. According to Casson, this is referred to as an out-group homogeneity effect. Research using brain imaging or cognitive methods have found that as soon as we categorize an unfamiliar person as a member of our in-group or out-group, we immediately process information about them differently at even the most basic levels. This conflict has the same elements as racism, sexism, and prejudice. It is in these groups identity is formed, self-esteem is established, and comparisons start. Social groups are more than just categories. They serve as a basic human need. According to Casson, these categories continue in unspoken ways, such as identifying with a culture, feeling more comfortable around a specific race, or making claim to a membership of a group. These social categories not only simplify things, they also bring a sense of belonging. According to Chatty, people place themselves into a category for attachment, interdependence, and an inherent need for self-esteem. As people group themselves into categories, the need to maintain self-esteem within a group mounts. According to Casson, threats to one's self-esteem heightened a need for in-group favoritism, and in-group favoritism enhances one's self-esteem. Humans alone have value because they're a creature of God. In a group, they find purpose and meaning and can increase their self-esteem. Because self-esteem is vital to human existence, people naturally spend a lot of time ensuring that there is a balance. Relative deprivation is a theory that explains the need for balance and fitting into environmental settings. According to Chatty, a house may be large or small. As long as the surrounding houses are equally small, it satisfies all the social demands for the dwelling. But let a palace arise beside the little house, and it shrinks from a little house to a hut. Relative deprivation is something children frequently notice in school when the majority of students all have a particular lunchbox, brand of jeans, or backpack. According to Chatty, there are more theories that emerge in the framework of relative deprivation, such as frustration, aggression, justice, and hedonic relativism. In relative deprivation, what someone else has that a person may want to obtain and cannot causes internal conflict. This person may become frustrated at their attempts to get what they want to obtain and may even become aggressive or argumentative. Because this object cannot be obtained, the person may attempt to convince themselves that there is still justice in the world by finding other ways to think about it, such as noticing others who don't have the object at all. Hedonic relativism would eventually say that this person would experience a lower positive self-effect when the object cannot be obtained. According to Chatty, a study found that lottery winners express the least positive effect in day-to-day life, while the paraplegic individuals were no different than the controls. Just like people have a basic need to eat, drink, and breathe, humans also have a deep need to belong. It's in that belonging they find purpose, meaning, and a stable self-esteem. This starts at a very early age in children and continues throughout a person's life. According to Casson, each of us strives to enhance our self-esteem, which has two components: a personal identity and various collective or social identities that are based on the groups to which we belong. Personal identity can be thought of as a tire that's just sitting around. This tire has value independently because it is a tire, but being put in with other parts like brakes and steering wheels, a seat, or a motor, this places the tire in a new category. This category or group is an example of social identity. It is where a person is more highly esteemed. If a person previously had an object, but was unable to obtain a current similar object, according to the Davies-J curve, as the object cannot be obtained decreases, expectations would rise and anger would result. As this person notices others who have the object and ones who do not, this would be using social comparison. In a school group such as cheerleading team, an object such as a brand name jean may be shared with cheerleaders. According to Chatty, this is known as impermeable in group boundaries. When boundaries are permeable, the jeans are not shared, and the individual may disassociate from the group and seek out a higher status group. There are people in the world with different music preferences. Some may listen to Beethoven or Christian, while others may prefer heavy rock music. In a study done by Shepherd in New Zealand, by using a self-esteem rating scale and a music preference scale, how self-esteem was influenced by music was studied. The results were only partially supported and showed that the same results as a previous study. The findings found no evidence supporting self-esteem and music preferences, but there were small correlations between music preferences and self-esteem. The need to belong is an inherent need in people. A sense of belonging can be obtained in groups. It is within the groups that a construct of self-esteem can be created. Although racism, sexism, and prejudice continue to lurk beneath the surface of different behaviors, it is also built within the walls of categories and groups. Learning to value the difference between people may require a look at a person's own need for acceptance and self-esteem. According to Casson, thinking in a more polycultural way, that is, focusing on the ways that racial and ethnic groups have interacted and influenced each other's culture throughout history, can be very effective in promoting positive intergroup relations. Learning to recognize a personal bias in oneself and others would also initiate continued changes in bias behaviors. And now that you've reached the end of the presentation, here are the two questions I have for you. Why do people have music preferences? How does this music preference influence their in-group and out-group behaviors? Are there any biblical verses that support this idea you have? How does the category of being a Christian influence your identity and self-esteem? What example of homogeneity versus heterogeneity can be seen in the church, and how can this change?